Whosoever holds this podcast, if she be worthy, shall possess the power of Thor. Today, we are taking a look at the mighty Thor herself, Jane Foster, because your geek history lesson is now in session. Hello and welcome to Geek History Lesson. I'm Ashley Victoria Robinson.
And I'm Jason the Nay Inman. Welcome to Geek History Lesson. This is what we call the Mind University. It's a podcast where we invite you inside to a university and we teach you all about one character from pop culture and everything you need to know about them before you see a certain movie with thunder in the title in a little bit less than an hour. Welcome. And thanks for listening. Hello and welcome to our podcast in case you're a first-time listener. Maybe you're not. If you're a second-time listener, a third-time listener, a fifth-time listener, welcome back.
If you want to hear the birth of the Nay joke or get more context on that, check out our episode on Thor, episode 185.
I think I've been saying Nay in terms of Thor for years. It's just like always one of these, when I think about Thor in Marvel comic books, I think about all the Shakespeareanisms, as you will say. And you say, Nay and doth thou protest too much? Yeah.
If people want to go back into the Jawiin archives and they want to find your like Avengers #1 video, that's the first time I ever heard you say it.
The origin of the Avengers. It's on youtube.com/Jawiin. But that's not what we're here to talk about. We're here to talk about Jane Foster.
We are.
AKA the Mighty Thor, AKA Medical Doctor. Jane Foster, because she's showing up in this new movie called Thor, Love and Thunder, which is one of the newest Marvel Cinematic Universe entries. And we thought this would be a perfect refresher for you before you walk into that realm, or as some people on Earth would call it, a movie.
Yeah. So what are we doing first?
Ashley, did anybody suggest this episode, by the way? Nobody likes Jane Foster,
Nope.
huh? All right. Well, then I guess we're jumping right into the 10-cent origin, which is the first part of our podcast, where we're going to give you a Cliff Notes version very quickly of everything you need to know about Jane Foster in case you go to a rad cocktail party on Asgardia, and Frigga comes by and says, methinks I need to know more about this Jane Fostereth.
No. Jane Nelson Foster, a.k.a. Thor, a.k.a. Valkyrie, is a Marvel Comics superhero who made her first appearance in Journey into Mystery number 84 in September of 1962. Journey into Mystery, in my opinion, one of the greatest comic book titles of all time.
Yeah, that's something we're missing in comic books nowadays, is all these funky, startling
Tales
stories.
Suspense.
Tales of Suspense. House of Mystery.
House of Mystery, also very good.
Yeah.
Created by Stan Lee, Jack Kirby, and Larry Lieber, her abilities include superhuman strength with additional powers when wielding Mjolnir, including dimensional transportation, physical transformation, electrical manipulation, flight, weather manipulation, electrokinesis, which I'm pretty sure is the same thing as electric manipulation, star creation, generation, and, as Valkyrie, access to the Underjam, maybe that's how you pronounce it, I don't know, and a shape-shifting weapon and flight. And she has been portrayed in live action by Natalie Portman, very famously in the MCU, and voiced by Vita Linder in The Mighty Thor, Kari Wahlgren in The Avengers Earth's Mightiest Heroes, and Erica Lindbeck in Avengers Secret Wars.
I believe that's Kari Wahlgren. Is that the same actress that voices Starfire?
Yes.
Yeah.
Then maybe I typed it wrong.
No, it's fine. It's fine.
She's great, though, and Jason has had a chance to interview her several times.
She's a nice lady. Yes. She's a great voice actress. Yes,
amazing voice actress. And if you want to listen, like I said, to our previous Thor episode on Thor Odin's Son, that's episode 185 in your Geek History Lesson feed.
We should also just really quickly just say that there are going to be a lot of Scandinavian and Norse words in this that we're
doing our best.
Badly mispronounce, but we're going to make really good attempts, and we don't mean to offend anybody, and we're sorry ahead of time.
Yes. But you know what I am not sorry about, Jason?
I don't know.
I am not sorry about all the excellence that is going on in Marvel Club, because we're doing this episode at the same time that Marvel Club Month 2 is launching. And
Marvel Club Month 2!
I'm so excited about it, and I'm so excited to tell everybody else about it.
Okay.
So if you haven't seen, then where have you been? But we are doing a whole series on the Thor movies leading up to Thor Love and Thunder as part of Marvel Club Month 2. And we're doing a special offer where if you sign up this month...
in the month of July.
In the month of Yuli, we are sending out these really cool Comica Girl, Sarah Louver, Jane Foster, Thor, the Mighty Thor prints, which you can see on our social media. And they're just really cool. And we're talking about Jane Foster in this episode. So I wanted to make sure that if you're listening to this because you love Jane Foster, you get as much Jane Foster content from us as possible, which includes Marvel Club, which will culminate our Thor series with the Thor Love and Thunder
But
review.
we should mention the coolest thing about this print is that if you were a member of Marvel Club back in May,
yes,
and you put these prints side by side,
her next to Stevie Strange,
form a continuous image, and then there is going to be one more print. I believe in September or October for Marvel Club 3. So it's the only way you can get all three is you have to sign up at patreon.com/Jawiin, Jawiin, for a special offer to support this podcast in the month of July.
Yeah. And then I can't wait to see everybody's interlocking prints all together at the end of the year.
It'll be pretty cool. All right, cool.
Okay.
Now to meet cute, right?
What is that?
That's where we first tell you how we first meeted and cuted said character.
Yeah, Jason, where did you first meet Jane Foster, the Mighty Thor?
I'm pretty certain I met Jane Foster in the late 90s when I was reading Dan Jurgens and John Romita Jr.'s Thor run. It was called the Heroes Return run. It was after post Heroes Reborn, which is everybody knows if you listen to this podcast for a long time. It's a favorite little storyline of mine. And I believe that Jane Foster showed up because at that time, Thor's alter ego was a paramedic. I believe his name was Jake Lloyd. No, Jake Lloyd is the kid who played Anakin.
It is Jake Weber?
I don't know. It's Jake something. And I want to say that in that storyline, because he was a paramedic, they crossed paths. And there was a big deal because he was like, oh, no, it is Jane. I remember at the time, I had no idea who Jane Foster was, because I hadn't read the old Thor stories. And so that's how I first discovered Jane Foster. How about you?
I had read stories that Jane Foster appeared in previous to the 2011 Thor movie, but for me, it was mostly that movie because I was not really, I hadn't read any Thor comics. So I know that I'd read some events that she had showed up in, like Civil War. She plays a pretty significant part in Civil War, but that was the first time I really remember knowing who she was. So like a lot of people, I was actually introduced by the movies.
And we should clarify right now that the big difference between the first Thor movie and Jane in the Thor comic books is that in the comic books, Jane is a medical doctor.
Yes.
In the movie, they make her an astrophysicist. I don't mind the change. She's still a doctor.
Yeah, I don't mind. I don't really think it makes that much of a difference to the story that they're telling.
I agree. I think it makes a little bit more sense why she would go to Asgard as an astrophysicist, to be honest with you. So I don't mind that change. I know some people will bother about it, but I think it's just fine. She's still Dr. Jane Foster.
Exactly.
All right, let's get to the History 101, where Ashley's going to give us the big ol' everything you need to know download on Jane Foster.
Okay, so here's the thing about Jane Foster. Her life is a tragedy in the Shakespearean sense. So there is a lot of death and there is a lot of suffering at multiple parts in her story, including her origin. So her mother died from cancer at the age of 9. Cancer is also going to be a running theme throughout this episode, so I guess a content warning if that is something that you're sensitive to. Jane might not be the gal for you. So her mom died of cancer when she was 9. Her single father worked 2 jobs for her entire life, mostly as a plumber, very blue-collar worker, in order to put her through medical school. Medical school initially meaning nursing school versus like a doctor's track.
Yeah,
she's a nurse for a long time, and we will talk about when she makes the change.
Yeah, she was a nurse in a lot of the Silver Age instead of a doctor.
Yes, because God forbid we had lady doctors in the 60s.
That's right. That's basically what it was.
No, I mean truly, that's the trajectory. Wonder Woman, Diana Prince kind of had the same trajectory for a long time, which is nothing against nurses. Nurses do not get paid enough, and they do the goddesses' work. So like, be nice to freaking nurses. So her father worked 2 jobs to put her through nursing school when the time came. Like I said, her mom died of cancer. Her father died of a heart attack, which it's kind of implied was brought on by the stress of working 2 jobs in order to put Jane through nursing school.
Oh, okay.
So
why didn't she get a scholarship? Come on, Jane.
Not that smart, apparently.
Come on, Jane.
Apparently.
Oh, she had bad grades, obviously.
Yeah, she was on the pass-fail track. You know what I mean?
Why is he putting you through school? Go join the military or get a scholarship, Jane. Come on.
You take that up with Marvel Comics.
I know.
So by the time she is a young adult, she's an orphan. She has no parents. She has no family.
Okay.
Which when we talk about her romantic life, I think is going to reveal a lot about her love bombing and need for attachment.
Well, it also makes her an opposite of Thor because Thor has a very big family
and an overbearing parents. Yep. At times.
Yeah.
After graduating and working as a nurse, she went to work under Dr. Donald Blake. Jason, Who is Dr. Donald Blake?
Dr. Donald Blake was
Old man.
Let's say a misanthrope who he liked to wander into caves that he shouldn't be in and bother aliens here and there.
That's not even a lie. That's like a real thing.
That is legitimately in the origin of Thor.
Yep.
He stumbles upon aliens in a cave.
Yep.
And he accidentally finds a mystical stick. I don't know if we're at that point, but that is Donald Blake is the first human guise of the mighty Thor.
Yes. So Donald Blake has a cane that he taps 2 times and he turns into Thor. He's Thor's eyes on Earth.
Yes.
Basically. So Jane starts to work for Donald Blake as his nurse in his private practice. So because he was Thor's alter ego, Jane kind of unwittingly helps Thor on several adventures, including breaking up a civil war in San Diablo, not a real place, and battling the Executioner in order to protect medical supplies. Most of her adventures are in and adjacent to a medical emergency.
That makes sense.
She's a nurse. It totally makes sense.
She doesn't wander into caves like Dr. Donald Blake.
No, she might not have had a scholarship, but she was smarter than that. And Thor always showed up during these events, and Jane never questioned it.
And we should make it clear for the listeners at this point in Thor's history, this is kind of the classic story of this was when Thor was banished to Earth, and the idea that Odin had banished him to Earth to live in the guise of a human. And so it's
humble him.
To humble him, yes. And so like he was eternally anchored to Dr. Donald Blake. They sort of had a shared existence.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And in the classic kind of Superman conundrum, Jane was in love with Thor. Donald Blake was in love with Jane. Thor was in love with Jane.
Everybody's in love with Jane.
Love triangle that nobody can quite manage. Jane loved talking about Thor, and Donald Blake hated hearing about Jane's love of Thor. High drama. It's the 60s. Being associated with Thor often puts you in the crosshairs of a very specific Marvel Comics villain, Jason. Who do you think that might be?
Loki.
That's right. The god of lies. Loki would disguise himself as another old man.
Ooh.
This was also old man Loki.
Can I
before
make
he
a
was
guess?
young, sexy Loki.
Dr. Donald Blake.
Dr. Donald Blake, exactly. And he used his magical powers to hypnotize Jane. And with Jane under his influence, she led him into Dr. Donald Blake's office, where Loki was able to challenge Thor to a battle in Central Park. Dun, dun, dun. 'Cause New York is the center of the universe.
Yeah.
And because Jane was in Loki's thrall when the battle started, she kind of like wandered around Central Park while Loki and Thor were fighting. And then Loki noticed her, transformed a tree into a tiger, which attacked Jane, and it forced Thor to put his attention on her instead of Loki, so Loki could like get the upper hand. Thor was able to save Jane and defeat Loki and take Jane back home because it's the Silver Age. You got to wrap everything up in 36 pages. This is a pretty standard Jane Foster adventure for decades and decades and decades. Because sadly, like so many other supporting characters, particularly female supporting characters, she's relegated to the role of a damsel in distress. She doesn't get a ton of character
normal
development.
for the Silver Age, which,
Yes.
the 60s to the 80s.
Yes.
It's the same for the villains. It's just like the villains, they rob a bank, they go to jail, they come right out again. And there isn't a lot of depth to a lot of these stories for like almost 30 years.
Yes, exactly. That kind of changes in the Bronze Age, and then more into, with notable exceptions, of course. Donald Blake struggled with whether or not to tell Jane about his dual identity as Thor. And he even tried to call Thor down in front of Jane, but Odin said, no, and magically just made it not happen. Thor just didn't appear.
Odin is a buzzkill. I will say this multiple times. Marvel Comics Odin is a buzzkill.
Usually godheads in pantheons like this are unless they, like Zeus, are trying to get it. They're usually a real big buzzkill.
Trying to get it, huh?
Well, I was trying to make that as unadult as I possibly
Got
could.
It.
But
trying to get
Zeus is always trying to pull.
Thor, getting it in thunder.
Yeah. With Jane, that's definitely his MO. But over time, Jane did develop an attraction to Dr. Donald Blake, who by the art could be old enough to be her grandfather. And after she was attacked by Lava Man, though, he didn't even try to save her. And she was so distraught at having been attacked by Lava Man that she left his employ and she went to work for Dr. Bruce Andrews, who's sometimes called Dr. Basil Andrews. Andrews?
Dr. Basil Andrews.
Because Silver Age and what is continuity, and we don't know him.
We all know. Well, we love Dr. Basil Andrews. He's an integral part in the MCU universe.
Do you think he's related to Julie? To the Andrews sisters?
We can only
maybe? Hope. I also think we call him Basil maybe to imply that he's English and maybe snooty. I don't know. But it turned out that Andrews was no better because when they're together, they get attacked by Cobra, and he literally submitted in terror and was like, "Take Jane, save me."
Like most normal people would be.
At the feet of a villain with a weapon? Yes, exactly.
I mean, I don't know if they would give up, their paramour.
He's literally doing the old timey comic bit of like, "No, please take my wife."
Yeah.
I mean, they're not married, but
why did he become James Cagney?
No, please take my wife.
Yeah, that's Basil.
That's how all old timey.
You want my wife?
That's how all old timey people talk, right?
Yeah, you're lava man. You're no lava man, are you? She.
Who's on third? So Basil Andrews didn't really work out. So what did Jane do with herself? She went back to Dr. Donald Blake.
Of course she did.
She needed a job.
Yep.
She got no parents. Yep. She's a single lady living in a boarding house. She got to pay bills.
Mm-hmm.
Thor at this time sought to pursue Jane's hand in marriage and began begging Odin to let them get married. Now, Jason, do you think that Odin allowed this? Do you think he allowed?
Of course not. Odin would not allow a marriage with a mortal.
If you had a daughter, would you allow her to be married to a god?
Yeah. Well, it depends on the god, right? Okay, let's talk about this, right?
Yeah.
If it's somebody like Apollo from the Greek pantheon, sure. Yeah. Go for it. If it's somebody like Morpheus of the Dreaming, no. It just depends on the character of the person. I don't think I would let my daughter marry Thor.
No?
Marvel Comics Thor. He's
what about like Scandinavian? No, what about Norse mythology lore?
No,
Thor?
He's even more cantankerous. No. I don't know. Yeah, I would maybe let my daughter marry. Trying to pull out a good example. It's really rough. It's really hard.
Well, the problem with the men gods is they like to assault people.
Yeah, like Apollo. I'm going back to Apollo. I think Apollo's a pretty safe choice.
Apollo, Prince of the Sun.
Athena. My daughter can marry Athena.
Oh, the goddess says you can make out pretty well with the goddess.
Frigga.
Says.
You want to marry Frigga? Go for it.
Yeah, but Loki, no. Balder, no.
Well, it's funny. Most of the Greek pantheon people I wanted to say are mortals, like Odysseus and Achilles. I'd be like, yeah, go marry Odysseus. That's fine.
Well, Achilles is a demigod.
Mm-hmm. And Hercules is absolutely terrible in the North and in Greek mythology. So I would not let but no, I would not let my daughter marry Thor.
Would you let your
college bro?
Would you let your son marry Thor?
No, same reason.
So I want to tell you that Odin did say no, but he did eventually relent with conditions. Do you have any idea what those conditions might have been?
That he gets to visit and use their couch whenever he wants.
No,
he goes a-wandering.
I'm glad you didn't invoke prima nocta either. No, it was under the condition that in sort of the Thor comics tradition, Jane proved that she was as worthy as a goddess to marry Thor.
Oh, what does she have to do this?
You know what? There's no rules. It's just a vague thing. It's like she's got to be good and brave and pretty. Like it's
all subjective.
There's no trials. Yes, it's whatever Odin says.
It's whatever Odin.
That's
whatever that's what invisible bar he has.
Exactly.
Okay.
But I am sad to inform you that when they were attacked by Mr. Hyde, it appeared that Jane was helping him. She wasn't intentionally. She was trying to trick him. So Odin determined that because she helped Mr. Hyde, she was not worthy, and he rejected the marriage request.
I told you he's a buzzkill. Odin is a buzzkill.
But Thor kept rescuing her, and so Jane just fell deeper and deeper in love, and so on and so forth.
Got it.
Eventually, Thor did go against his father's wishes and tried to reveal his true identity to Jane, and she got so mad that she left the United States.
Because she found out his real identity? That's why she left?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, she found out that he switched with Donald Blake.
Oh, because she's like, you've been lying to me for years, and she left.
Yeah. So she literally left the country.
That is a common reaction to a secret identity.
To being lied to?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, Lois does the same thing to Superman.
She leaves the country?
She doesn't leave the country, but she doesn't talk to him for a while.
Yeah, she leaves the country and kind of runs right into the arms of the High Evolutionary, but not intentionally.
Everyone's favorite character.
Everyone's favorite character. I don't know if I want to bother explaining who that is because it
Don't
doesn't
even-
really matter.
Don't even.
Thor saves her from the
Mystical
high...
cosmic guy.
Yes, Thor saves Jane from the High Evolutionary, and he brings her back to Asgard to beg Odin once again to let them get married. And this is a huge deal because mortals aren't allowed on Asgard. Odin said, though, that he would allow them to marry if once again she proved herself worthy of an Asgardian goddess, because that's who Thor is supposed to marry. And so to help her along this time, he grants Jane superpowers. To be like, all right, go prove yourself. Things don't go well. And I'm shocked to report this because realistically, Jason, if you suddenly got superpowers and were just let out in the world, do you think you'd be capable and able to do literally anything?
No, I would probably explode a couple of buildings apart accidentally.
Right. It's a huge learning curve. And also, I just want to say, if Jane Foster were a man, I don't think this many tests would be thrown at her.
In fact, it would be one of these things where, like, if superheroes actually existed, I think many cities across the world would have a lower population than what they actually have, because I think everybody would move out of cities to have less chance of running into a superhero. Of
having like a superhero be thrown through your building.
Yeah.
Especially in New York. Jane was confused. She didn't know how to operate with all of these new Asgardian abilities. So Odin declared her a failure, turned her back into a memory.
Turned her back into a memory.
Sorry, turned her back into a mortal, wiped her memory of having ever encountered Thor, and flung her back down to Earth. So she is now a blank slate. She is tabula rasa.
So he kicked her into the Rainbow Bridge, kind of like how Leonidas kicked that guy in 300. Like, this is Asgard!
I'm going to say, yes, it was exactly that, and I can't wait to see it rendered on screen. I think Odin's dead, though.
Odin is dead. You're talking about the Marvel Cinematic Universe. In the comic book, he's dead every other Friday.
Yeah, well, so are all the Asgardians.
So is Thor.
They always like fall into the Odin sleep and then like never wake up. Jane then began working with and fell in love with Dr. Keith Kinnaid, proving, I guess, that she only dates her bosses.
She has a type. Doctors.
Yeah, it's dudes old enough to be her dad.
She gonna run into a Doctor Strange here anytime soon?
She said, no daddy issues.
She's gonna definitely fall in love with him. And Clea's gonna have some issues.
I'll say this: even when she's the mighty Thor, Clea could absolutely destroy Jane Foster. Because Clea's a little bit evil. So at the same time, when she's off being romantically involved with Dr. Keith Kincaid, this is when
sounds like a soap opera character. Dr. Keith Kincaid.
Dr. Keith Kincaid. Dr. Kincaid, the baby. I've lost it. I don't know. I've never watched a soap opera.
Don't worry. Just put yourself in my arms and let my soft lips take your morning away.
Wait, you taste like coffee. You don't usually taste like coffee. Are you your long-lost twin brother who finally woke up from the coma?
Yes, it is I, Todd Kincaid.
That's how soap operas work, right? Telemundo can hire us at any time.
My brother fell off his climb of Everest, and I am here to take up his life and restore it with honor.
But wait, do you have a medical degree?
No. I will have to learn. On the job!
Okay, I'll cover for you. We're in this together now.
Yes, we are. And
I'm suddenly pregnant again.
I also murdered 5 people on the way over here.
That's okay. These were on the rose-colored pages, so this is a dream sequence.
I secretly have a lust to murder. Every day.
Okay.
Yes.
So we'll only treat bad people so that you can that you're morally right in your murders.
Yes, you're perfect for me. Kiss my lips.
Do. These are the days of our Asgard.
Yes, next week on These Are the Days of Asgard.
Somebody make that
Dr. Keith Kincaid survived his fall from Everest.
Oh, no. And like I said, this is at the same time that Thor and Sif are also becoming romantically involved. My preferred Asgardian romance. Jane fell ill, and in a fit of fever, she called out for Thor, which is weird because her memory was wiped and she shouldn't know who Thor is.
Comics.
Hearing her call and wanting to save Jane's life for a reason that I couldn't find, Sif answered, and she sent down part of her life force and put it into Jane's body in order to keep her alive.
That's a little weird.
Comics.
Okay.
But she didn't really stick around to see how things panned out. She was just kind of like Queen Nehelenia in Sailor Moon, just threw a crystal shard down and Jane was fine. So because of Jane's new connection to this new Asgardian, all of her memories of Thor that Odin had previously wiped out came flooding back. Dun, 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 dun. And and what do you think came along with all of these memories, Jason?
Superpowers?
That's right, romance.
Okay.
So Jane and Thor swung back into the on-again side of their on-again, off-again equation.
So Thor just bounced Sif hard and went to Jane.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I am telling you, Sif does not deserve Thor. Like, she deserves to be treated so much better. Sif is so beautiful, and she's such a badass, and she takes so much guff from Thor because Thor always...
This is more Sif love I've ever heard from you.
Thor always swings her aside the second Jane comes back onto the scene.
Mm-hmm.
No, I really like Sif, actually, and I would have loved to see her used more in the MCU. So they're kissing again, and Jane is promptly captured by trolls. That's like a real thing that happens. Trolls are, and not like trolls that live under the bridge, like proper cave trolls, because this is Norse mythology.
Yeah.
During her escape, Jane was actually able to defend herself for the first time in their relationship. And from this point forward, she insisted on joining Thor for more of his adventures and taking a more active role.
And he was like, V-Day, baby. I have other women across the world. I can't see you. Why do I sound like Doctor Strange? I can't have you see my other ladies, Jane. I have a lady in Rio de Janeiro. I have a lady in Melbourne. I have a lady in Qatar. You can't come with me, Jane. Just stay in America.
Well, privately, Thor believed that Jane's more adventurous spirit was due to the piece of Sif's spirit that was held within her body. Which I think is a little bit convenient. It probably has more to do with the way we told story about women at the time,
so he
evolving.
Was like, maybe I'm going to go back to Sif.
No, he was like, ooh, maybe I'll get, like 2 birds, 1 stone, 2 birds, 1 hammer.
2 birds, 1 store?
I was going to say stone.
Reference. Okay.
But I don't like the implication of killing birds. I like birds.
Okay.
I love birds.
All right.
So together they went back to Asgard again, and the Grand Vizier, which I want to say, a Grand Vizier is a Middle Eastern title, not a Norse title. The amount of mythology mixing that goes on in Marvel's Asgard is quite something.
You can thank Jack Kirby for that.
Yeah, why is there a French swordsman? Mm-hmm. So they go back to Asgard. There's a Grand Vizier. The Grand Vizier bestows Sif's sword upon Jane, who was suddenly able to use it. And when she touched it, what did she do? She transformed into Sif. So weird. So when she was on Asgard, she was Sif, and when she was on Earth, she was Jane.
Oh, I don't like this at all.
Theoretically.
What does that mean?
So I just want to point out, I will tell you how this worked out, but I want to point out.
This is the opposite of the Donald Blake Thor.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This is an exact mirror of the Thor and Donald Blake sort of mixing of identities that at the time when the story was happening didn't exist. Donald Blake was just not there. So how do you think it worked out?
I assume I know they split apart again.
Yeah, not well. Not well is usually the answer when it comes to doing things like with this level of comic book logic.
Okay.
So a couple of months. So Sif, she's Sif, right? Jane Foster touches the sword, transformed into Sif.
Sure.
She's on Asgard for a couple months as Sif. Then she goes back to Earth and simply does not turn back into Jane Foster. She's just Sif on Earth with her sword.
So Jane Foster's just gone.
Yeah.
Evaporated away into the mists of eternal.
We don't know where she is. But remember when I told you that Jane Foster had a boyfriend/boss, Dr. Kincaid?
Dr. Keith Kincaid?
That's right. Maybe this should be like a show that Clea and Stevie watch or something. These are the days of our Asgard. So in the months that she'd been gone, Dr. Keith Kincaid, thank you, I was hoping you'd do that, filed a missing persons report because his girlfriend had been gone for literal months.
This writes itself.
So actually, I will say, to Dr. Keith Kincaid's credit, he's actually a good boyfriend. He filed a missing persons
I'm glad
report.
He lived.
He did.
Remember, he's dead on Everest. So, in between the episodes
that's
here,
right.
he came back.
Yeah.
And his brother Todd.
Well, he came out of the coma. He didn't die. He fell into a coma.
He fell into a coma, and he was in a village for several. And he joined a ninja bat cult for a while.
And grew a beard, as one does.
Yeah, but he learned how to disappear into the shadows.
And then he had that sort of like Jack from Lost flashback hair when he came, because he hadn't cut his hair in months because he was in a coma.
Spoilers, is a flash forward here.
Oh,
yeah, that's flash forwards, not flashbacks.
Now in season 2, it's a flashback to his wife Susan. It turned out that what had happened was when Sif sent her life force in the crystal into Jane's body, Sif's body and the rest of her spirit traveled through the rune staff, which is a magical Asgard thing, into an alternate dimension. And when Sif switched with Jane and she went back to Asgard, Jane was sent away to that same alternate dimension. So, comics.
This makes about as much sense as the storylines of Days of Our Lives.
These are the days of our Asgards. So Thor and Sif, even though Thor had shunted Sif off to make out with Jane, used the rune staff, the magical Asgardian thing, to bring Jane back and to save everyone else who was being held hostage in the alternate dimension by a villain known as a possessor. The possessor was in charge of like the magical dimension where she was.
His job is literally in his name.
It is. And almost immediately upon returning to Earth, Jane Foster married her boss, Dr. Kincaid, and gave birth to a son.
That was quick.
Named Jimmy.
Wow.
Did you know Jane Foster had a child?
I did not, but Keith works fast.
Well, maybe she was pregnant in the alternate dimension. Maybe it's Thor's baby. Maybe it's
Jane.
Sif's baby.
Dr. Keith Kincaid here.
Oh, yes, my husband.
You have a beautiful boy,
Thank you.
and I want to name it Keith.
No, his name is Jimmy.
No. I want to name him Keith
His name is Jimmy.
so that he can grow up and also be Dr. Keith Kincaid!
These are the days of our Asgards. We'll return after these brief sponsors.
Hello, I'm Dr. Keith Kincaid. Have you ever had trouble getting up in the morning? Well, if you're like me, you need some Folgers in your cup.
The best part of copyright.
There's Folgers in your cup. 4 out of 4 doctors named Keith agree that Folgers is the best coffee.
So, this is the time when Jane trains and becomes a doctor and levels up from just being a nurse.
Oh, she levels
So she
up.
officially becomes...
While having a kid. Look at her go.
While having a kid. So she's a doctor now. And she becomes a consulting physician to a very famous superhero. Do you know who that is?
Iron Man?
That's right, Tony Stark. Did you actually know that?
I think I remember this. I know if there's a while she works with Doctors Without Borders for a while too. I know. I do remember that she worked for Tony at some point.
Yes, and this pretty much, if you've been like a little muddy on the timeline, this brings us right up to the beginning of Civil War.
Oh boy! All right.
That's how little Jane has to do in the Silver Age. Jason,
Okay. Yeah.
What is Civil War?
Well, Ashley, it was a turbulent time in the United States of America when President Abraham Lincoln was, talking about,
Let me tell you, when I did the citizenship test, there was a one-word answer about the Civil War.
Yeah, it was about slavery.
Yes, right.
But the Marvel Comics Civil
yeah.
War was about a bunch of superheroes had blown up Stamford, Connecticut.
Mhm.
And the government passed a law saying that all superheroes must reveal their secret identities, must register, and must technically basically be like police officers registered to the government. Iron Man said, that's a great idea. Captain America said, that's a terrible idea. And they split apart and basically had a superhero civil war.
Mm-hmm.
And Iron Man kind of won.
And this put Jane at odds with her employer, Tony Stark, because Jane opposed the Superhero Registration Act, and she even joined the Secret Avengers.
Now, can I put a brief editor's note in this, Ashley?
Sure.
During this storyline, during Civil War, do you know where Thor was?
Dead.
Correct.
So
He was dead.
Yes.
Because at this point, right before Civil War, Ragnarok happens.
Yes, and he was killed by the Serpent.
Yes, and all of the Asgardians are dead.
And what kind of inspired Jane to like take up with the Secret Avengers was the Warriors 3 took like kind of their sweet time to tell her about Thor's death.
Mhm.
She was really angry and she kind of wanted to put her anger but also her skills into better use, and this was what she thought was better use.
Yeah, and it was interesting. It was an interesting move on Marvel's part that I think they left Thor off the board for like 2 or 3 years.
For quite a while. For a long time, for a character that we now think of as like a mainstay of the Marvel Universe and a mainstay Avenger.
As sort of Marvel's Trinity.
Yes.
It's now sort of Thor, Captain America, and Iron Man.
Yeah.
But yes, they left him off the board for quite a while.
So, like I mentioned, Civil War is going on. There's a lot of strife. Jane is sad because Thor has died. This bleeds into her personal life.
Mm-hmm.
Jane and Dr. Keith Kincaid divorce.
Oh, no.
Jane loses custody of her son.
She loses custody of Keith Kincaid Jr.?
Of Jimmy. He goes to live with his father. And then they both die in a car crash.
That is a soap opera.
So Jane has at this point lost her mother and her father, her husband, and her son.
Don't forget, Todd Kincaid is out there, though, still.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
He's still out there. I bet he's in a coma and, somewhere on Everest.
Yes.
But Todd Kincaid is out there. So do not worry, listeners. I bet Todd and Jane will get together soon.
Well, I will tell you this. After the divorce, another old flame shows back up again. Who do you think that is?
Dr. Donald Blake.
Dr. Donald Blake. He shows up on Earth again.
Yeah.
So I have to ask you, because we've talked a lot about him. I always think of Dr. Donald Blake as being kind of a punchline.
Why? Because of the movie?
Because he's a joke.
Okay. He's not really a joke for me.
So that's what I wanted to ask you. How do you feel about him as a character? Should he be in the Marvel Comics universe?
That is a very complicated answer, Ashley.
I know.
But I didn't mean to say that so seriously. I don't know what to be like. Wow, that is a very.
I was like, I didn't know you had a thesis on Dr. Donald Blake. Here we go.
I don't think he should be a character now.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think he works anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But he is very integral to the Thor origin.
Yes.
And the idea that through Dr. Donald Blake, Thor kind of goes from the Norse mythology Thor to the superhero Thor.
Yeah.
And it's through Donald Blake that he does this.
Yeah.
And I don't remember, to be honest with you, I'm certain we talked about it in the lesson. I don't remember exactly how he shunted off the Donald Blake and what happened to Donald Blake. I know Donald Blake got lost in a dimension.
He just kind of goes away, cosmic-y.
And then he sort of appears again.
Cosmic-y. Yeah, there's very little explanation.
Yes, and Dr. Donald Blake is like sort of responsible for how Thor comes back to life.
Yes.
He's sort of like those dimensions you were talking about where Sith and Jane were trading places. That's sort of like where Thor has been, and that's how like he births them back to existence, and they go back to the old like hit the stick and they transfer places. I like Donald Blake, but I think Donald Blake was a cipher for the audience to be able to understand Thor in the 60s. And I think our audiences are a little bit more intelligent now. And I think, we're having movies about multiverses.
Yeah.
So I think audiences can understand the concept of a science alien that pretended to be our god for years.
Okay.
I don't know. I like the idea of Donald Blake, but I actually kind of think the first Thor movie did the best thing of it, where they just kind of made it a joke and threw it away.
Yeah. Reference it and then moved on.
But I like Donald Blake in the comic books, and some of those early Thor comic books are like really good. And like the conflicts that Stan and Larry, who deserves a lot of credit, his brother Larry Lieber, was a big part of Thor, and actually a bigger part of Thor than probably any of the other Marvel characters. So Larry deserves a lot of credit here, probably more credit than Stan, to be honest with you. And I think those Donald Blake stories work. They are very much of their time, though.
That's fair. So Donald Blake is back. So you know what that means. Jane and Donald start dating again, because apparently that's all she's good for.
She likes doctors.
She do. She is a doctor. Jane and Donald Blake then begin searching for Sif for a while. In fact, Blake had only sought out Jane because he suspected she could connect with Sif again, since they had once shared that connection where they got lost in the universes together. Then Jane learned that Sif's spirit had been reborn into the body of a dying cancer patient. Here we are back on the cancer train. She was able to use Dr. Donald Blake to call on Thor to save Sif right before the old lady's body died. So here's the pattern. We're just saving everybody.
Well, this is the thing. So this is during the J. Michael Straczynski Thor run.
Yeah.
And what they said would happen to the Asgardians after Ragnarok is that like all of their spirits fell to Earth and they
fell into different bodies.
And they were like sort of inhabited in different bodies. So like a lot of this run is Thor looking across the world for the Asgardians.
Yeah.
And then he like touches them with a stick and then, they're Heimdall.
Yes, exactly.
You know?
And he does,
it's Odin.
And he does that to Sif like literally seconds before this lady dies.
Exactly.
Jane then moved to the city of Asgard, which was floating over Roxton, Oklahoma at the time, with Dr. Donald Blake, and they started a medical practice together because that's what science god aliens from the future need.
Yep.
Doctors practicing earthbound medicine. While she was there, Jane was diagnosed with breast cancer. And while she did accept Thor's care and help, she would not take any magical treatment. She only wanted a traditional Western medicine.
Okay, can we talk about this?
Sure.
This is a thing that carries on through Jane for quite a while.
Yeah.
It actually becomes a big part of her, which I assume we're going to get to, her Mighty Thor
We're
run.
right up against that. Yeah.
Ashley.
Yep.
And with staying on the fun side of things, right? Because we both have known people that have gone through cancer, and we probably have listeners that are listening to this that are probably dealing with family members or even themselves that have cancer, and it's a terrible situation, and it sucks for everybody. So I want to touch on this a little bit.
Yeah.
I do not buy in a million years, and maybe this is just me, and I would love to hear your opinion on this. I do not buy that if there was a magical cure out there for cancer that you would not take it.
I agree, but this is the to evoke loss again, this is the man of science, man of God thing.
Yeah.
She is a character of science, and so she will only accept science.
But here's the problem with this. And this is, to me, why that doesn't work with Jane.
Mm-hmm.
Jane's character up to this point has literally been so connected to Asgard, so connected to this magical science, this alien technology. She is friends with superheroes, and she won't take advanced technology to save her.
Okay, look, I'll put it even more frankly.
Sure.
They put a ticking time bomb on her so that she wouldn't have to be Thor forever. In case people hated it. That's why this was done.
I understand. That is the writer logic.
Yes, but the in-story narrative, I don't believe if you were, because of it.
I'm not crazy on this, am I?
No,
okay.
Because not that long after this, during the events of the Mighty Thor, I think it's even during Thor Goddess of Thunder, the first volume, her cancer metastasizes and becomes stage 4.
Yeah.
Which is very serious. And she still doesn't accept magic. So
yes.
I don't believe that, but that is what the comic book said, and that is what the canon is.
Yes, I understand that they wanted to, and I bet you also Jason Aaron, because I know he's the writer that developed this for the Mighty Thor Jane Foster run. Great writer. It's a great run, too.
Absolutely,
it's literally one of the best Thor runs of all time.
Yep.
But I understand that he did this. He probably even...
He did this in case they had to nuke it at issue 4 or 6 because nobody liked it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or he gave himself an escape plan. In case nobody liked it. But people liked it way more than he thought they would.
Yeah.
And it went on for quite a long time.
Yep. They made action figures.
Mm-hmm.
So Thor, Odin's son, during this time had become unworthy of wielding Mjolnir, and the magical hammer was left on the moon, waiting for someone to come pick it up. But Mjolnir is even though it's mostly portrayed as inactive, it is like a living magical thing.
Sort of.
So
when the writers want it to
well,
be.
exactly.
Yeah.
So it was calling out to Jane telepathically.
By the way, listeners,
Jane,
we should give you a little sneak peek. Next week's episode is going to be about, I'm going to be going into the history of a little bit of Asgard to kind of give you some nuggets that I think they're going to touch on in the movie. And we are going to talk about Mjolnir.
Yeah, man.
And we are going to talk about why it is sort of sentient.
Because magic. Jane did answer the call with the help of Heimdall. She had Heimdall punt her up to the moon, who brought her to Mjolnir. And when she picked it up, she was imbued with the power of Thor. I'm shocked. Jane was able to quickly learn how to wield the hammer, having spent years watching Thor do just that. I know that's a really lazy shorthand, but I kind of like it.
I buy it. She's watched the game tape.
I just like that they're like, we're not going to give you a training montage.
No.
The lady knows what she's doing.
No, she's been hanging around with Thor for 20 years. Of course she knows how to use the hammer. Yeah.
So although her identity was kept secret for the entirety of the initial story arc, I'm not going to pretend that reading the run at the time that it wasn't pretty obvious. Mjolnir does enhance Jane's physique. It makes her taller. It changes her hair color. But there are so few women in Thor's world to begin with that in my mind, she was pretty much the only option.
I also want to say that they like sort of revealed it and then they backtracked on it real quick. I want to I could be wrong on this.
They teased it, yes.
I want to say
they were like, no, it's not Jane, and then it was Jane.
It was I want to say they accidentally revealed it was Jane, and then suddenly they were like, no, it's not.
Here's a story about that time. So I was working at Earth 2 Comics in Sherman Oaks at the time.
Lovely store, great store.
And reading this, and my coworker Stacy and I, we were, when the reveal that it was Jane, when the confirmation issue came out, we were fully screaming at each other across the store about it, and our coworker Kirk came in and was like, I haven't read the issue yet. We had spoiled it for him. But it was a huge deal when it was revealed. It was a huge deal within the story. We're going to talk a little bit about that right now. So as the Mighty Thor. So the Mighty Thor equals Jane Foster Thor. Thor Odin's son equals the blonde dude Chris Hemsworth plays, in case anybody needs that going forward.
And they kind of made a thing where they started just calling, his name is Thor.
Yeah.
But they started calling him Odin's son.
Yeah.
And just like a little nugget for the movie.
Yeah.
Because Bor the God Butcher is the villain of the movie, played by
Gore the God Butcher.
Gore, sorry. Bor is Odin's father. Apologies. So similar names.
Yeah.
Gore the God Butcher. The reason why Thor dropped his hammer is because Gore whispered something in his ear. Yeah. And basically the idea that he's like, you, like, gods are so selfish. It was something like that. And that's the reason why because Thor believed him.
Because Thor's not very bright.
Yes. And
sorry, he's not.
it wouldn't surprise me if they wink at that somewhere in the movie.
I don't think they'll wink at it. I think they'll do it.
I think they'll do it.
Based on the amount of things from the trailer, they just straight up lifted, even from
and that's
framing.
Fine.
No. I'm not saying there's anything. But like Esad Ribic, who's the artist of the Gore the God Butcher storyline,
he should be paid way more.
Yes, is an incredible artist. Like they literally, they lifted entire panels. I think that's going to have a lot more to do with that movie actually than the Goddess of Thunder storyline. So, as the Mighty Thor, Jane battled against Malekith and Laufey, who you've seen if you've seen the MCU movies, who were engaged in an alliance at the time. I know they're both dead. I would love if we got some kind of wink at this in the movie personally. The Mighty Thor also joined the Avengers, as Thors are all pretty much want to do in the Marvel Comics universe. She came into conflict with Thor Odin's son, who wanted his hammer back, although he did eventually recognize Jane's worthiness and handed her back Mjolnir, accepting a new weapon for himself, which we've already kind of seen hinted at in the
Yarnjabor.
Yarnjabor.
It's the axe. It's really cool.
It is so cool. Odin and Freya launched a huge investigation into the identity of the Mighty Thor until they were waylaid to defeat the Destroyer. And since the Mighty Thor helped them save the day, the Asgardian agreed to cease investigating, which was a lie, of course. They kept investigating. Jane defended Earth 616 from Earth 1610 during the incursions of Secret Wars and was lucky enough to survive the collapse of the multiverse because she had a popular book at the time. The Mighty
and the story wasn't done.
Well, yes, but also
the real question is
Mm-hmm.
After the incursion from the multiverse, did Dr. Keith, what's his name?
Kincaid. No, he died. Him and Jimmy died in a car accident.
But is he back?
No.
Did the multiverse bring back Dr. Keith Kincaid?
No, Jane is a widow and what's the opposite of an orphan? What's the title for like a parent who's lost a child?
I don't know.
I don't know if there is one.
Let's not dead out the podcast.
Nope. The Mighty Thor was part of a group of heroes called by Doctor Strange to fight on Battleworld, where the evil Thor Corps was founded by God Emperor Doom. Obviously, somebody was reading Dune at the time. She was able to turn them against Dr. Doom with the help of Thor of Higher Avalon. There's a bunch of Thors who were introduced across Thor history who all kind of coalesce into this event. We're going to talk a little bit more about them next week, but if you've never Googled...
Not really, but yeah.
Well, we're going to hint at them next week.
Okay, not really, but sure.
But if you've never Googled Thor of Higher Avalon, I encourage it because he's very, very beautiful. Together with the Mighty Thor, Odin's son, and the Thor Corps, they helped to aid in the resurrection of the multiverse and launch all new, all different Marvel, which was kind of the soft reboot of 2019's
Where
Marvel Now.
nothing really changed. It was way earlier than 2019, though.
No, 2013 is when Marvel Now happened.
Yeah. But like All New, All Different is like 2017-ish.
I didn't say anything about 2019.
You said 2019?
No, I said 2013.
Okay, my apologies.
Listen back to the tapes. Roll the tapes.
I'm still concerned
We
about
will not.
Dr. Keith Carradine. What's his name?
Carradine?
I want to call him Keith Carradine.
He's dead. He's not coming back.
Oh, man.
So All New, All Different Marvel ushered in an era of absolutely no change for the Mighty Thor. Like Miss Marvel and a lot of the other new characters who were created in the 2010s, she had so little continuity to mess with that she simply set out on a bunch of new adventures.
It's just a new logo on the covers.
Yeah, basically. So the Odin son was missing at the time. So the Mighty Thor had to step up in the conflict between Svartalheim and Alfheim in order to stave off Loki's mischief. Loki once again allying some of their baddies. The Mighty Thor also joined the Avengers again, where she helped to form a new Avengers team, but her proximity to other characters meant that they would sometimes discover her identity as Jane Foster. So the first two characters to uncover her identity, Jason, do you know who these were?
I'm pretty certain one of them is Sam Wilson, who at the time was Captain America, because I want to say they start dating.
That's good. So the first one was actually Kang the Conqueror.
Oh, okay.
And then, yes, Sam Wilson, who was Captain America at the time.
He figures out that she's sick.
And there's the very famous cover where they're flying in their key scene.
Yeah, because this is the all new, all different Avengers.
Yes.
Where it was basically like post Secret Wars. You know, we had Sam Wilson, Captain America, we had Miss Marvel, all these alternate characters like sort of joined the Avengers.
Joined a team. So Sam, because
Miles is on this team, I think.
Yes,
Miles
he is.
Morales, Spider-Man, yeah.
Because we punted him over from the Ultimates. Sam kept the secret to himself. He even went on to support Jane in her civilian life. He took her to chemotherapy because that's the kind of guy Sam Wilson is. I don't really love them as a couple. It's not like something I ship, but...
It's her first not doctor.
Exactly. But I do really like, you get to see Sam's goodness in this storyline. Like it's a great moment for him. Then Secret Empire happened. Captain America was a Nazi and the Marvel Comics universe shifted forever. During this time, Jane's cancer was affecting her more and more. She was noticeably weaker, even in her form as Thor. And despite this, the Mighty Thor joined the group of superheroes who stood alongside Iron Man, fighting against Hydra's takeover of Washington, D.C. Madam Hydra was able to use a shard of the cosmic cube, you know it, it's that blue cube, and allow Captain America to lift Mjolnir. So basically using...
Evil Nazi Captain America lifts Mjolnir.
Yes, so basically using a cosmic cube, she was able to change the rules from you have to be worthy to lift the hammer to you have to be the strongest to lift the hammer. And so Captain America was the strongest, so he could lift Mjolnir. He used it to smash the Mighty Thor into an alternate dimension. And while she was stuck there, she befriended a farmer named Hekla, who helped the Mighty Thor get back to the 616 with the help of a magical orb. Even without Mjolnir, she was able to help her fellow Avengers protect Washington, and upon her return, Mjolnir did come back because ultimately Mjolnir works in the service of Thor. And it was then discovered that whenever Jane and Mjolnir were separated and she returned to her human form, all the medicine she had been taking to stave off the cancer were magically flushed from her body. So she was basically in a form of stasis where while she was the Mighty Thor, she was still getting sicker because the medicine wouldn't stay because the magic thought it was toxic, I guess. So she had to be Thor more and more in order to try and stay alive because her cancer had metastasized, like I mentioned earlier. And Doctor Strange eventually warned her that the next time Jane transformed, I wrote into Doctor Strange, the next time Jane transformed into the Mighty Thor, she would die. So she wasn't really able to save her life as Jane because Mangog sent Asgard flying into the sun. So the Mighty Thor, of course, had to do something about it. She used Mjolnir to secure Mangog in a chain, threw them into the sun, which means she didn't have Mjolnir to save her anymore, shared one last kiss with Odin's son, changed back into her human body, and died in the arms of her beloved. But she died saving Asgard and the world and everyone she loved, which is, as far as a superhero goes, it's a pretty good end, I have to say. It's sad, but it's a pretty good end. So then Jane's soul was sent to the gates of Valhalla, as you go to if you're a Norse person.
It's a Norse heaven.
Norse heaven. And she was unsure if she could enter it or not. So while she's standing there kind of being like, am I going to try the door?
Did she see Dr. Keith?
Absolutely not.
He'd be there.
He's not Norse.
He's in Valhalla, I'm telling you.
He's not. Odin and his son worked together to revive Jane's body in Asgardia. Jason, do you think it worked?
Yes.
Of course it did. It's comics. So she basically...
Because she's in a movie. That works.
They brought her back to life. She went back to chemotherapy. She cured her cancer, and she told Thor that he could be Thor again. It was like really kind of convenient, but comics.
Well, Thor Ragnarok was coming out, and they needed Thor to have that hammer real quick.
Nuts. Yeah, that's 1,000% why this happened.
In modern
brand synergy.
In modern Marvel comic books from about 2010 to about 2000 to now.
Yeah.
You can really see when the writers do these different storylines, you can tell there's a certain point where Disney comes along and says, we got a movie coming out soon, so that person better not be that. We want Peter Parker to be Spider-Man. We want Thor to be Thor. We want Steve Rogers to be Captain America, and you better change it real quick.
Yeah, so recently she has gone on to claim the mantle of Valkyrie, but that is pretty new stuff, so we're going to leave off here in an effort not to spoil anything from what's currently being published, but I just wanted everyone to know that when she stopped being the mighty Thor, Jane does get to continue being a superhero. She's Valkyrie.
And she still has Asgardian powers. So,
she does. And she's going to, I think, remain a part of that pantheon for a really long time.
I agree. I think they're going to keep her around because people love the Mighty Thor run.
Exactly. She has a book coming out right now called Valkyrie, Jane Foster Valkyrie. So check that out if you want to know more. And if we ever revisit this character, we'll get into that. So that is your history on Jane Foster, the Mighty Thor.
And I say thee nay.
Yeah. What do we do next?
Going to the recommended reading, where if you go to if you go to Geek History Lesson, that's a completely different site. But if you go to geekhistorylesson.com/recommended reading, you will find a complete list of Ashley's recommendations. If you want to check out more about Jane Foster, you click on them. The little widget takes you to Amazon, and you can pick up that book. Toot sweet. Even throw it on your Kindle immediately.
So I'm going to start off with Thor Volume 1, Goddess of Thunder. This is the story where Jane becomes Thor. You literally
really good.
Start from issue 1 and read forward.
And this is Russell Dodderman, I think, is
Russell
the artist?
Dodderman on art. Jason
great.
Aaron writing. Really, really amazing.
It's really good.
I'm also going to recommend Thor the Mighty Avengers. Thor the Mighty Avenger, which is the Jane Foster Thor that picks up after all the incursions. It's kind of her version 2.0. It's where she joins the...
It's the same title, but it's just later on the run.
Exactly. And this leads directly into her relationship with Sam Wilson. So if that intrigued you, check that out. I'm also going to recommend Valkyrie, Jane Foster, Volume 1. That is the only volume that's currently out if you want to see what she's up to as Valkyrie. And then my last stealth recommendation is What If number 10. From 1978. In this story, it asks, what if Jane Foster was Thor?
And she becomes Thoris.
Yes, for one issue.
Yeah, they renamed it Thoris, which is such a terrible name.
Heralding a really popular character that would happen like 40 years later. It's a fun issue to check out. It's funny to see how much they get right and how much they get absolutely wrong.
I am convinced that Jason Aaron read that issue.
Yes, I agree.
And has I think that was his whole idea. And I would even I have never read the pitch document. I'm sure it's out there somewhere or is collected in one of the hardcovers or whatever.
Yeah, I'm sure.
I would be surprised if he did not reference that issue in his pitch.
Yeah. It's a really fun read. It's really accessible. So, Jason, I have a discussion question for you.
Okay, please.
Did Jane Foster's profile raise more significantly after the first Thor movie, so when she was played by Natalie Portman when we saw her in live action, or after she was introduced as the Mighty Thor? Which do you think had a greater effect on the character?
And there's no correct answer.
No,
either.
exactly.
Boy. It's definitely the movie.
Yeah.
Because we wouldn't have gotten the Mighty Thor without the movie.
That was also going to be sort of my leading addition to that was is it a little bit of an Ouroboros now that we're actually seeing Natalie Portman play the Mighty Thor?
It is.
Because she started the character's upswing, which started this incredibly popular run, which has maintained her popularity and brought Natalie Portman back to Marvel Studios.
It is. I think that's exactly what it is. I think you don't get that storyline without Natalie Portman's performance. Yeah. And I think she's really good in that movie.
Check out more on that in Marvel Club.
Yeah, we just talked about Thor 1 and Thor Dark World by the time of this recording.
Yep.
We might be at Thor Ragnarok by the time of this recording. I'm not. Don't call me on that, but
Ragnarok, if it's not out, it should be right around the corner.
By the way, we were actually also thinking, we're just throwing it out there, we're thinking about doing a live stream for the Thor Love and Thunder review. So if you want to check that out, you got to come to the Patreon. It's definitely the movie.
Yeah.
The comic book bounced off the movie, and it did raise her profile. I mean, she got an action figure. Jane Foster Thor appeared in a couple of cartoons.
I have 2 Jane Foster action figures.
We have 2? I know we have the one.
We have the Marvel Legends, and we have the Funko.
Oh, we do have the Funko.
Yeah.
It's a great design.
It is an amazing design.
It's so interesting. We've talked about this a lot.
Comic book costumes always look better on women.
That's what I was just about to say. It's so interesting. You take a male comic book costume, you throw it on a woman, and it looks a million times better.
Yeah, we have better figures. Sorry, not sorry.
Well, I mean, it's true. It's that joke from Seinfeld, right? A woman's body is a piece of art. A man's body is utilitarian.
Yeah. I mean, he's not wrong.
And a little bit of that social stigmas as well.
Yeah, of course. Yes. A lot of that is,
but yeah, it's both.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's the movie. It's definitely the movie.
Thanks, Natalie Portman.
Yeah.
Alrighty. Shall we move on to the honor roll?
Please.
What's that?
The honor roll, whereas if you go over to Apple Podcasts and leave us a 5-star review, we will read your review live on the air as thanks for giving us a 5-star review. So you can literally write whatever you want, and we will read it on the air. Ashley, who is joining the honor roll this week?
Joining today is Carly P., who says, Best Geek Podcast. I started listening to Geek History Lesson when I found episode 99 about Deadpool around the same time as the first Deadpool movie. I've been a regular listener ever since.
Thank you,
because I don't think we were nice about Deadpool in that episode. I have yet to find a better comic book podcast. As long as Geek History Lesson is around, I don't think I will find a better one.
Oh.
Thank you. So who can Carly see when she comes into the Teacher's Lounge?
Well, Carly, I will tell you, can't remember his last name. Dr. Keith, what's his name? Kincaid. What? It's a double alliterative.
Yes.
Why can I not remember this?
Like Thomas Kincaid,
yes,
the painter,
I understand.
the Master of Light.
Keith Kincaid. Inside the Teacher's Lounge, I will tell you that, the citizens of the Marvel Universe may think that Keith Kincaid is dead. But in our universe, Keith Kincaid is very alive, and he is teaching dramatic writing.
Ooh.
So come and join the class with Dr. Keith Kincaid.
These are the days of our Asgard.
He's very dramatic. He's sometimes too dramatic, and sometimes he wears a beret. I don't know why.
There you go.
Yeah, so come enjoy. Thank you so much for writing that 5-star review. If you want to be just like who, I'm sorry?
Like Carly P.
Like Carly P. Thank you so much for that review. Go over to Apple Podcasts, leave us a 5-star review. It helps listeners find our podcast. If you enjoy this episode, please tell your friends. Word of mouth is the best way to spread a podcast, and we appreciate you listening.
And if you're an international listener, because we can't see your Apple Podcast, please screenshot it and email it to geekhistorylesson@gmail.com.
By the way, I also want to point out that Ashley skipped my least favorite segment of GHL, the teaching tweet, and I'm not mad about it. So we're gonna keep going on.
I told you last episode that I've been doing that intentionally.
Oh, you did?
For like 8 weeks now.
I keep forgetting about it.
Yes, trying to roll it out, but you keep bringing it up.
To get rid of it?
Yes.
All right. I'm fine with it.
We literally had the same discussion last week.
I'm sorry. These episodes go right out of my head. So professional. Okay. Don't forget, everybody, you can follow this podcast. Where, Ashley?
You can do that at geekhistorylesson.com, where we have a brand spanking new blog. We have new posts every Thursday. Facebook.com/geekhistorylesson, on Twitter with their character restrictions at GHL Podcast, and on Instagram without their character restrictions at Geek History Lesson.
And you can follow Ashley on Instagram and Twitter at Ashley V. Robinson. You can follow me on Instagram and Twitter at Jawiin. That's Jawiin. And Ashley, hashtag stuck around, where we make sure our listeners have a little bonus discussion at the very end. What are we talking about?
Do you think calling everybody Thor is confusing?
Yes.
I don't like it when they're like, Thor is a title.
Thor is
It's not. It's his name.
Thor is his name. It was, okay. So I was reading The Mighty Thor when it was coming out.
So was I. The Jason Aaron Thor, beginning
Yep.
with Gore the God Butcher, amazing.
Yep. And then
outstanding.
at the same time, they were publishing these miniseries that were The Unworthy Thor, and
Yes,
that was
yeah.
Thor Odin's son.
Yeah, which was also great.
Yep. And Thor Odin's son was still on a couple Avengers teams, but
Yep.
so was Jane.
Yeah.
And yeah, his first name is Thor.
Yeah, it's not a title.
I understand calling somebody else like the Mighty Thor, or there was the War Thor, or even Ultimate Thor, but like it was confusing as hell.
Yeah.
It was very confusing because like they really leaned into be like, no, I am the Odin son. And it's like, no. It would be like me being like, no, I am the Inman.
Well, it's also
Do not call me Jason. I am the
It's
Inman.
also the problem of Thor is both his birth name and his, I almost said his Christian name about a Norse mythological character.
It is his Christian given name. Thor Odinson.
It's his first name, his birth name, and but his superhero, he has a public identity. He doesn't have an alter ego. So like, yeah, Iron Man.
He's like Jean Grey. He doesn't have a code name.
Exactly. They can all be, Marvel Girl, such a great name. They could all be Iron Man because his name is Tony Stark.
Yeah.
Or his name is Rhodey Rhodes. Like nobody else is going to be like, no, I'm Tony Stark.
Yeah. I'm Tony Stark. What?
Yeah.
No, you're James Rhodes.
Oh, Captain Mike. What is it? I am Spartacus. I am Tony Stark.
I am Steve Rogers. No, you're not. You know?
No, you're Bucky Barnes. Calm down.
Exactly. It was I get it. They really
and like bless Jason Aaron for just being like, I guess I got to commit to this.
I understand the idea of it, but like it doesn't quite work. It really, and they bent over backwards to try to make it work.
Every issue where those two characters talk, it was like, no, you are Thor, but also I am Thor.
At the time of this recording, we haven't seen Thor and Love and Thunder. I almost guarantee you Thor Love and Thunder is not even going to mention it. He's Thor.
Well,
his name is Thor.
Let's pause on that because that's going to be what we're talking about in the extra.
Okay. We'll get there.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll get there. But I'm just saying, like,
yes.
I guarantee you the movie doesn't even have this conversation once.
Well, based on the trailer, you'll have to listen to the extra for me to finish that thought.
She's just Jane, is what it's going to be.
Don't say that.
So, there you go. Anyways, thank you so much for listening to Geek History Lesson, everybody. I am Jason Doesn't Have a Hammer Inman.
I am Ashley Victoria Robinson.
And Ashley, will you please close out the podcast and possibly throw out some sad words for the loss of Dr. Keith Kincaid?
Absolutely not. Class is now dismissed.
Oh.